Awesome. Okay. So we being the Allamakee Energy District, in conjunction with SETI and Kelsey and the folks down at Clayton County, hosted a air source heat pump training that we did that was contractor focused about 2 weeks ago. It's all very complicated, but essentially, the training was done by an organization called the Midwest Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative, which is basically a partnership of several other organizations, which include the Minnesota Center for Energy and the Environment and the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. The program was paid for through a Department of Energy grant, and then the actual training itself was done by a private contractor, Slipstream, which is based out of Madison. So it's all very complicated. So anyhow, so I'm just going to give you guys kind of a brief overview, a few slides of what was talked about, and then a few slides from the presentation from the folks at the state level talking about what Iowa's upcoming rebate program might look like. So going to the next slide here. So if you go to the Midwest Air Source Heat Pump Collaborative's website, it's a great resource. There's tons of information on here. I just wanted to real quickly point out, you can see the website here, everyone, I assume?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, good. So under resources, if you come down here and click customer engagement, there is a publication that they've put together called Focus on Energy Guide, and it's essentially a consumer-focused guide for deciding how to install a heat pump, talking about what your different options are in terms of equipment, how you should work with a contractor, what questions you should be asking the contractor, what considerations come into play given your existing HVAC setup, what your utility rates are. The guide itself is about 30 pages. I've read the whole thing. It's really well put together. So if you're at all inclined to, offer some sort of resource to people within your network, whether those be homeowners or what, this would be a great guide that you might be able to use to steer people toward like how to make a decision. So I just wanted to point that out here.
Paul,
Yeah.
the link for this, could those be put in the chat or something? So
Yes.
Yes, I'll email those out tomorrow too, and I'll package it all up together along with this recording. But I also have a question. Do you know, is there anything that prohibits, as long as you just reprint as is, to just go ahead and do your own print order and put them like in libraries or whatever?
No, and this is another question that I have for them that I still don't have an answer to, whether they would allow us to essentially rebrand their guide with SETI or individual energy district logos on. They're doing lots of work on a state level basis, trying to make like guides and fact sheets and everything that they're distributing to many different organizations. I'll have to check on that, but my gut reaction says absolutely not. I don't think they're going to have an issue with that. And ideally, we could rebrand that guide for SETI itself.
Yeah, that'd be cool if we could.
Yeah. Okay, so back to my presentation here. So I just pulled a few slides. There were about 100 different slides. Again, this was contractor focused. A few of them that might be relevant here to what we're talking about. So we kind of started off just like level setting. What are the different terminology that we're using when we say, for example, cold climate, air source heat pump? What is that? Is there a definition of what a cold climate unit is? So this slide here basically kind of breaks down the different equipment categories. So on the far left where it says residential air source heat pumps in green, from that, essentially, there are two different types that are delineated. The ideal cold climate version would be an inverter driven. When it says inverter driven, that means that it's basically variable capacity and that the heat pump can modulate up and down to whatever the heating and the cooling loads of the building are. So it has variable capacity. So it's able to basically meet different loads depending on what the heating and cooling conditions of the building are at any one given point. Below that in the orange, they're kind of the conventional heat pumps. Now, these are kind of the heat pumps that have had a bad rap for the last 40 years. These are essentially single and dual stage units. So basically they operate on an on position or they're not operating. So they're operating at 100% or 0%, or with a two-stage unit, potentially they're operating at, 65% and 100% or in the off position. So within the inverter side of things, there are different configurations. There's centrally ducted units, they're short ducted units, they're ductless units, like a wall mount configurations that we've all seen. And then within that, there's single zone and multi-zone equipment. There's a lot there. I don't need to go into any of this, but I just wanted to provide this just as a little bit of context for starting. Given that heat pumps, both their output and their efficiency is relative to what the outdoor temperature is, and the fact that generally speaking, we live in a cold climate, and to add to that, generally speaking, gas rates tend to be pretty low. And if you look at electric rates, they tend to be pretty high. Kind of the consensus that's emerged is that probably the best way in for most people is through a dual fuel configuration where you're essentially pairing an air source heat pump with a gas furnace. So what that allows you to do is to take advantage of the situations in which it's most economically advantageous to use the heat pump. So basically when it's outside above a certain temperature threshold, you're going to rely on the heat pump. And then below a certain temperature threshold, you're going to use the gas furnace. Now that temperature threshold can essentially be user defined. So you're going to have an outdoor sensor included with your thermostat that you program so that the thermostat basically will know when it's, for example, 20 degrees and above, the heat pump runs, and then below 20 degrees, the gas furnace kicks in. So this is kind of the sweet spot for the upper Midwest, where gas rates tend to be low, electric rates tend to be high. Kind of thinking about it in terms of a dual fuel situation for most folks probably makes the most sense.
Paul, question on that?
Yes. Yeah.
So would this be different in Alliant and Mid-American because of the difference in electric rates?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, definitely. So our all-in electric rates in Alliant territory are like 18.5 cents, whereas yours are about 11, I believe. So definitely the economics change, and the fact that Mid-American territory sits below, for the most part, sits below, or at least where we are up here in Decorah in Alliant territory. Your climate is going to be more advantageous to air source heat pumps anyway. So yes, that's definitely a potential. You know, in addition to just switch over temperatures and fuel prices, there are other building specific considerations. So older buildings that have really high heating and cooling loads tend to not be good candidates for all electric situations, because just basically the electricity demand to accomplish that is, you know, oftentimes not cost advantageous. You run into, you know, supply issues. You have 200 amp service to your house versus a potential smaller service that you might get away with in a dual fuel configuration. So there's a lot that comes into play. But generally speaking, a lot of these organizations have kind of come to the conclusion, and field-based research where they've looked at the performance of these units, at least as the technology exists now and as the electric rate structures exist right now, dual fuel for many, many folks is kind of the way to go, and they're kind of encouraging contractors to essentially push dual fuel setups. So just as a case study here, so this is looking at, this is a field performance test that they did in Michigan, looking at dual fuel heat pumps for propane customers. Propane on a BTU basis is more expensive than natural gas is, so the economics for heat pumps are much more favorable for propane customers. What they've done here essentially, they looked at 8 different sites based on different types of heat pumps. So you'll notice 1 through 4 are variable speed heat pumps, which are going to be your most expensive type of heat pump. And then sites 5 through 8, actually number 6 is incorrect. That should say a two-stage unit. So these are essentially 2-stage and 1-stage units. And basically what they're looking at here in the second column where it says incremental cost, this is the incremental cost difference between a new central air conditioner and the heat pump. So you're going to kind of assume that you're going to have central air conditioning anyway. So most new construction or most existing houses have central air. So what's the marginal cost difference between the central air conditioner and a heat pump? So in the incremental cost, basically for units 1 through 4, the 2,500 to $3,200 is the cost difference between the air conditioner and the heat pump. Below that on sites 5 through 8, basically given that single and dual stage heat pumps are cheaper, that marginal cost difference tends to be less than an inverter heat pump. Pairing these units then with a propane furnace, they're basically saying that from the baseline gas furnace, the propane gas furnace, you're able to see a reduction in propane usage anywhere from basically 34% to up to 67% reduction in propane usage, which is huge. So you're kind of maximizing the air source heat pump for when it makes sense to do so economically, cost-wise, and then the gas furnace when it's more advantageous to do so. So they led with a slide. There's a lot of information here, but what they were getting at basically is if you look at number 8, so number 8 was actually the cheapest heat pump. The incremental cost difference was only $600. It essentially paid for itself within a year, and it basically achieved the most propane reduction of all the units listed. So basically, any heat pump is going to be better than no heat pump because you're able to some degree, offset gas usage. Questions on any of that?
Yeah, Paul, I'm assuming that this is the Air Source Heat Pump Coalition, so there wasn't any data presented on like geothermal or those options.
Correct. Yep. This was just air source specific.
Air source.
Yep.
And then on the number 8, row 8, and that is looking like the highlighted option there, does it talk about okay, so it's a 1-stage compressor speed, but then is that like for mini heat, does it matter if it's like the ducted, short ducted, or like the mini heat splits, or do you know what that?
Yeah, so on a dual fuel setup, you're utilizing the ducting of the gas furnace. Yep. So these are all centrally ducted units. Yep.
Okay, and then lastly, obviously you're presenting this information as to a little overview as to what they presented, but the audience was contractors, correct? Just showing them, like getting them into the idea of like, you might consider installing these systems if you know what it means for your customers. Is that sort of the angle?
That is definitely their main objective. Also, given utility costs and upfront costs in equipment, I think their secondary objective is to have contractors present heat pumps in place of central air conditioners. Even if they're single and dual stage units, because if you can get that incremental cost down to nothing, which given the upcoming IRA rebate, you should be able to do that. That's a huge win.
Oh, right, yes. So in Wisconsin, is that already happening?
Yes,
they
yep,
are-
yep. The electric appliance rebate program is in place in Wisconsin. Yep.
Okay,
I believe.
Yeah.
Now that I say that, so there are a few states that have only started with their the efficiency rebate program, and I'm not sure. Actually, I confused myself on that. I think maybe Wisconsin started just with the efficiency program, and then the appliance rebate program is yet to come.
yeah, I don't see
But
Alan's
I'm not
call
entirely
in.
sure on that.
Okay, so, but what you're saying, I'm assuming you're gonna get to that point, though, that maybe you would give
Yep.
a scenario based on what you had been hearing, what was presented to me. Okay, I'll stop
Yep,
asking
yep.
questions.
Hey, Paul, I've got a question.
Yep.
Was there any indication on what the applications were for those 8 units? I mean, the last one seemed to have the greatest payback, but with the least cost. So were all of these new homes, were some of them sheds, or garages? Like what's the difference, and why was the very last one just a single stage compressor, but yet got the lowest payback time?
Yes, so they were all detached single-family houses, not new construction. We were told that the photo that you see here is number 8, but they were all chosen basically to be relative, similar to one another, of a similar square footage, similar construction type, assumed efficiency levels, and insulation and air sealing levels. So their goal was to standardize it as much as possible.
Got it. So the main difference then is just the different heat pumps. Like
Yes,
these
yep.
were all very similar situations. So it looks to me like number 8's the clear winner. Did they give any indication as to which pumps went along with which line item there?
In terms of which brand?
Yeah, like there's one, off the shelf at Menards and another one's a Bosch that you have to special order, or what are we looking at here as far as equipment goes? Because
Yeah, yep. So
it's huge.
yeah, so generally speaking, all the major manufacturers, for many decades, they've made single and dual stage units. On the variable side of things, like truly modulating heat pump on the ducted side of things with dual fuel, there are only a few manufacturers that offer that. If I back up one slide here, basically where it says model examples, standalone add-on inverter system. So Bosch IDS is their dual fuel setup. Bosch actually last week came out with a newer, truly cold climate dual fuel equipment, which is a totally different product line for them. There's the Gree Flex. Gree makes equipment for several other manufacturers. I believe Lennox offers the Gree Flex. It's the same. It's rebranded basically. Mr. Cool is actually that Mr. Cool, which is a DIY with pre-charged line sets. That their dual fuel inverter driven is actually manufactured by Gree. And then Mitsubishi IntelliHeat, which is a dual fuel setup. They've been on the market for about the last 18 months. And then Fujitsu, I guess, sometime in the next year is also going to be coming to market with a dual fuel equipment.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the reasons why I was asking this is just because this last spring I had my heater and my water heater and my central air replaced with a Bosch dual fuel system. So based on,
cool.
Your next slide, I was just wondering, did I get a good deal or not? I'm very pleased with it, by the way. Like it's done fantastic. And even with the old system, I haven't got a full year of it yet, but I'm saving so far in the cold about 20%. So
yeah, no, absolutely. The Bosch equipment is very highly regarded, and there's a lot. You go on Reddit, and there are a million stories on Reddit of people having great success with the Bosch IDS.
Well,
yeah,
I just got to bust in there and I noticed one variable in the chart there is the lockout temperature.
Yeah.
And I was interested, because that's adding a variation on a variation there as far as, what I'm saying, as far as the lockout temperature is different on each line item, and that could affect results one way or the other.
Yep.
So to combine those two questions then, Paul, Kenny, was your question, if line 8 is the clear, the standout there, is that the Bosch system?
No, I was really just sorry, I was curious because normally a variable system will give you more efficiency than a single speed compressor will. That seems like line 8 is off to me. And then also it's much less expensive than not much less, but it's less expensive than all of the rest. It's given a reduction that's near the top, but its payback is the best. So my question is why?
And it does lock out at 25, so which is interesting. What is did that get answered then as to why? Why is it? Because I agree, the single speed compressors are usually, I mean, isn't that what everything? The whole thing is all about VFDs these days. So
yeah, and a lot of the market though, so the dual fuel side of things, short of single and dual stage units, is not very well developed. There are only a few, Bosch, Mitsubishi, soon to be Fujitsu. There are not many truly variable speed dual fuel configurations on the market. And going back to my earlier point of them trying to use this as basically a way to make inroads for situations where someone might not be inclined to go with the heat pump, but if the incremental cost is so marginal, you'd be kind of stupid not to. That's what they're trying to present to contractors as being the route that you definitely want to go at the very least.
So that was sort of was that the gist of this, what the consortium was basically trying to push, that is particular to Iowa HVAC contractors that are like trying to get them to, just the contractor to get the mindset to change.
Yeah, that's definitely
What they were aiming for. Okay, cool, gotcha.
Yep. So this is a slide I put together. So it says, given our cold climate, where do heat pumps make sense? So first and foremost, those who are currently heating with electric resistance heat, baseboard, electric furnaces, whatever the delivery method is. Those with fuel oil, there's still a few people out there with fuel oil, and potentially those with propane. The savings for propane customers tends to be marginal, but there are advantages to an air source system over a propane system cost-wise. The second bullet point on here, new construction. So essentially any new construction, like you'd be amazed at all the new houses that I go through here. We do new home energy certification, and they're putting in dual stage, 96% efficient natural gas furnaces, and all of them with central air conditioners. You run the blower door test on these houses, they're incredibly tight. There's basically no reason why, at the very least, they couldn't be coupled with a heat pump in dual fuel configuration or potentially made all electric. In my mind, it's kind of a lack of imagination more than anything. And then I say those with small, tightly sealed and well insulated houses, existing homes that are well insulated. And then heat pumps make sense when coupled with generous rebates and incentives. So basically, you're trying to eliminate the cost difference between a central air conditioner and a heat pump. And then finally, customers with access to cheap electricity, namely those in Mid-American territory and RECs. So this is specific to Alliant here. So I say with electricity at 18.5 cents a kilowatt hour and gas at $1 a therm, a BTU of heat derived from electricity is 5.4 times more expensive than a BTU derived from natural gas. So when you run that through a heat pump, we all know that heat pumps are more efficient than electric resistance. So in our climate, you can probably assume that a heat pump is going to have a seasonally adjusted efficiency of 250%. That still means that the heat pump is going to be twice as expensive as natural gas. That's a hard thing to get over. Coming up with a solution for that is quite challenging. So continuing from above, the cost of running a heat pump when the outdoor air is 50 degrees is still going to be more expensive than natural gas. So even we've been talking about dual fuel so far, even dual fuel with natural gas is a hard proposition because oftentimes the savings aren't there operationally from the heat pump. Therefore, it's so important to get those marginal costs down so that it's kind of a no-brainer for the homeowner to basically elect to opt for the heat pump version over the central air conditioner. Questions on any of that? Otherwise, I'll talk about what the folks from the state presented on the rebate program.
I don't have any questions. I would just put the comments on that. There are a lot of Iowans that don't have access to natural gas. So that'd be an interesting thing. That would be an easy thing to turn it to actually get that information. So there's a lot of people in our RECs. There's also people in munis. But the other thing is the idea of when you are in those situations, and some of the contractors that I know that are trying to get into this market of putting heat pumps in are also saying, electrify, and then, we'll size solar for you. So, and that's also a part of this is there's the idea that if you got a little solar on your building, that helps to reduce the cost of those electric heat pump sources for sure.
Yeah, we've been working with a church in Lansing, Iowa. Lansing doesn't have access to natural gas. Everyone heats with either electric resistance or has a propane tank in their backyard. And we've been working with a church down there that is going to install air source heat pumps, and we think that they'll probably be able to cut their electric usage by 60%, which is huge.
Because they're going to put solar on the church as well as
they're just going for the heat pumps now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they're essentially switching from electric
resistant
furnaces
heat to heat pump. Yeah,
to heat pumps, and the savings are tremendous for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. Thanks.
Hey, Paul, assuming that natural gas stays at $1 a therm, what's the even out point with electricity cost?
I'd have to run the numbers.
I think that would be pretty easy. I was just wondering, like, with the increase in electricity rates, at what point will one overtake the other? And
sure,
if you could, like, just extend that out into the future and with everything. But just out of curiosity.
Yeah. And I could maybe include that, Jolene. I could give you some numbers on that tomorrow. And the other added benefit of dual fuel in general. So 2 years ago, when natural gas prices skyrocketed, a dual fuel configuration makes a ton of sense in those environments when natural gas is, because electricity is rate regulated and the prices stay the same, whereas gas prices fluctuate based on demand and market conditions. So if you're able to essentially hedge against gas by using a heat pump, like in certain years, that may be hugely to your advantage to do.